Hello and welcome to the channel. I wanted to make a special Christmas presentation for your enjoyment, and this is touching matters which are outside of watchmaking, but however we will be talking a little bit about what was happening in watchmaking during this period. And my focus today in this special Christmas edition is this humanitarian and social programs that the company of Montandon Frères appears to have been engaged in. And this is a quite fascinating topic. Now, we have several articles which we see every year, mainly in the Journal de Genève, but also in other local papers. And this is for encouraging youth to attend these various boarding schools. And this is really fascinating because apparently we see these efforts to send children either to a special school in Switzerland or abroad in Germany. And this appears to have been coordinated through their local churches, and this would be the local Protestant temple in Locle. And in these articles we see that one of the brothers in Montandon Frères, James Montandon, we find him basically behind a girls' school, a boarding house in Aargovie or Aargau. And this was a boarding school for young ladies in Aarburg, and there's a very interesting castle there. But we have an article, the undersigned informs parents who intend to place their young daughters in a boarding school, that towards the autumn they will be receiving new pupils, and the young girls entrusted to the boarding school receive a carefully supervised Christian education in all respects. Instruction essentially includes the study of the German language, French and English languages, music, and all the branches of knowledge that form part of a sound education. And then we have the individuals associated. Information may be requested from Pastor Segond in Geneva, Dr. Favre and Professor Borel Favre in Neuchâtel, or Mr. James Montandon in Locle, etc. So, and with James, we generally have, these appear to be pushing French language education for girls. Now, if we look at the other articles, and these are happening during the first part of the 1860s. So we're speaking of 1861, 1866, etc., basically through this period. And now we do have ones that are focused on a boys' boarding school in Germany, and this is just outside of Stuttgart in Cannstatt. And now these articles that we have, these are related to Charles Adolph Montandon in Locle, who is essentially directing interested families to sign up to this boarding school in Cannstatt. And this was a school which was founded in 1859 for young gentlemen, and this was run by a doctor of philosophy, Dr. Clos. And this individual, he is called Guillaume Clos, or William. This is Wilhelm Clos, and his full name was Karl Rudolf Wilhelm Clos. And he was a doctor of philosophy, and we even have a picture of him. But he appears to have lived born in 1804 and died in 1873. And he is a very influential individual behind many articles and philosophical works in Germany. But it's very interesting, this school that he was running. Now, it had basically around 30 places for Swiss students. And the subjects, now, this was for the instruction for both a professional education in commerce and industry, so it's pushing business careers. However, in preparatory studies for gymnasiums and polytechnical schools, the institution is staffed with excellent professors and public examinations are held each year. The subjects taught include German, French, English, Russian, Latin, Greek, religion, history, geography, natural history, physics, arithmetic, geometry, stereometry, algebra, writing, drawing, calligraphy, music, and gymnastics. So this is a huge curriculum. Now, these articles are essentially pushing this use of German language, since the bulk of the students were from Germany. However, there were English students here as well, but this was essentially for young men aged 8 to 16 years of age, and they were admitted under very favorable conditions. Now, admissions were taking place mainly in the spring and autumn. Then the majority of these pupils were German-speaking, which was a circumstance that benefited those interested in utilizing or learning German, and it was particularly recommendable for those who wanted to become familiar with German language. Now, the number of the pupils was limited to 30, and we also find that this establishment was situated near the Kursaal. Now, this was in Cannstatt, and nowadays this is Bad Cannstatt, and this is essentially part of Stuttgart already. However, in the day it was near Stuttgart. The city hadn't pushed that far north, but this was very well arranged, with spacious, well-arranged and well-furnished building, a large garden, a gymnastics courtyard, etc. Its healthy location and proximity to the countryside are highly recommended for young people of delicate constitution. This is noted. So we have these interesting social programs, these pensionnat, or boarding schools for young men and women who, these were essentially a structured education with a religious sort of tint. And so this was a proper upbringing. And it is interesting that we find such companies or such individuals as James Montandon and Charles Adolf concentrating on such efforts. They were clearly involved in community issues, and they were providing this contact information for these schools. So they clearly had this type of interest and involvement in such programs, which is essentially quite good for the community. Now, what was happening, and essentially we're talking the 1860s here, so what was happening in the watchmaking at this time? Well, at this very time, we had a series of very big international fairs where Montandon Frères were taking highest, actually, places, golds, silvers, etc. And this is both on the spring side with Montandon Frères Paris and Montandon Frères Locle. And we do see their wins, and indeed it was very interesting here because there had been several of these shows had already been, world fairs had been held in London. And we do see that Montandon Frères is essentially gravitating towards London. Now, Montandon Frères Paris did have a representation in London, and we can find the place. This is Hatton Gardens, and this is quite interesting. We have in these goldsmiths, jewelers, silversmiths, watchmakers, opticians, and cutlers directory for London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, and Sheffield. We see who was representing, and this was a P. Berger watch glass and French clock manufacturer, and he was from out of Gutzenbroek in Paris, but also London, and he had a depot at number 21 Hatton Garden. Now he was the sole agent for Montandon Springs, as we see in this period, 1863 advertisement. So this is quite fascinating. So watch and clock tools and materials, wholesales, and for exportation as well. And this individual was representing the spring side for sales throughout the early mid-1860s. Now it was at this time also that Montandon Frères Locle, the watch production, were also instituting their own local representation, and indeed it was the allied family member, Charles Adolphe Montandon's daughter, married this individual who opened essentially a representation, and he was importing music boxes and watches and various other Swiss goods, but mainly music boxes, watches, and these types. And this was Louis Mittendorf, and we find him in this mid-1860s, approximately 1864 to 1868. We find this on a street which is Percy Street. And this is quite close to the British Museum, and indeed not very far away from the Montandon Frères Paris spring representation sales. So they seem to have had an interest in these, in building something in London. They had probably been to London, attending these fairs. They became interested, and they attempted to establish their own local sales points. And indeed, at this very early stage in their history, the companies were formed in 1818, and by 1850, Montandon Frères Locle had relocated out of Paris back to Locle. However, they were on a high trajectory in correlation with the world expositions, with the amount of medals they had taken, and by this time we see them in the mid-1860s producing extremely high quality watches, luxury watches. They were producing tourbillons, and naturally as établisseurs for such specialized movements, they would procure this and then install and regulate and realize the sales to their customers. However, we find Montandon Frères Locle really branching out around the world at this time, and the bulk of their sales were destined for North and South America, and they were all over the South American and Central American markets for that matter. But these are a lot of very interesting pieces which we find materializing during this period. There was a lot of attempts to counterfeit their wares, which we find several warnings to the population to avoid buying counterfeit goods that would apparently be attached to them. And this is very fascinating. But and we also see their pencil, which is in we find this in a watch, for example, which is hidden under the dial on the movement itself. This is very fascinating. We see the Montandon Frères anchor, And this was really the height of the company. That they were really going into 1870s. They were extremely strong. They had an excellent reputation. They were involved, as we can see, with these boarding school projects in social outreach. So this was a company that was paying it back to their local communities, but they were enjoying international success, and this is really fascinating. And it should also be remembered that Montandon Frères Paris on the spring side, and these were, after 1850, these were most certainly functioning as separate companies, but they had been patenting their technology for their equipment. They had a steam-powered factory. It was the largest in France and indeed Europe. They had the highest quality springs. They were mass-producing. They had patented various different tools, including their 1857 patent for a spring measurement device, and also it could also measure spring barrels, their sizes, but the thickness of the springs for both clocks and watches. So this was a very high time for the company, and naturally we see by the mid-1870s the American mass production started to really be noticeable to Swiss watch manufacturers. But this is essentially almost a zenith period for the company. This 1865, 1870 period. They would continue to be very affluent and enjoy watch fabrication for the elites in the New World. So we can see a little bit about what sort of activities this company was involved in socially, and as well as their efforts in watchmaking, which were very successful during this period, and they certainly demonstrated their location at the top of these most elite Swiss watch manufacturers of the day. So I hope this was an interesting and instructive video. I hope you enjoyed the topic, and I wish you a Merry Christmas.